everybody, my name is François Letarte and this is my channel JDR-D30, a channel about tabletop role-playing games. So today this will be, well, some sort of impression and review of the game system called WaRP. WaRP is a role-playing game system. I think WaRP stands for Wanton Role Playing, and it's published by Atlas Games. This is a document that is free on Atlas Games website, so the link will be below. This is the game system, this is the generic game system that comes out from a classic from the 90s called Over the Edge. This was a game way advanced of its time back then. I remember that I've played it once. I don't remember much of the game. I know it's a modern setting, but something I do remember is that I found out that this game was very special back then. It all works around words, and words that you have put yourself on the sheet. Okay, you don't work with predetermined skill list or attributes. Okay, so well, I've printed out the game and I will flip through and comment. My experience with WaRP itself is resolved was around 3 game sessions that I ran in my RPGS experiment. RPGS, which is a book, a super setting with 16 kingdoms in it, and every kingdom I do play it with a different game system every time. So this one came out for the last sessions I did. So well, I've made 3 sessions using that game system. This was a suggestion, by the way, by a friend called Brian. He has a channel called Billion6, so say hi to Brian. So yeah, it's a black and white document explaining how to do WaRP system. Yeah, it's supposed to be a generic game system. The document basically starts by explaining the mechanic. Okay, you roll a bunch of dice and you have a difficulty number to beat. Well, these are D6 that you roll. Sometimes you have a bonus die, sometimes you have a penalty die. And the difficulty number, if you want to have an ID, well, an easy task, it's a difficulty of 4, moderate 7, hard 11, and so on. Okay. A bonus die, the way it works, if you get a bonus die, well, you take your die pool, you add 1 dice to it, and you roll all the dice, but you remove the lowest dice of the pool. So you don't add the dice totally, you just have the same number of dice that you would have without the bonus die. It's just that your pool will have a chance to have a greater result, and the contrary is the same for a penalty die. You remove the highest dice from the pool. Okay, creating a character, like I said in the intro, all the words are important. You have an idea of your character, well, try to work this out. Okay, you have 4 traits to create for your character. Traits are kind of keywords that describe what is your character. You have a central one, which defines what you're doing, usually in your life. 2 secondary traits, which are other stuff that you can do, and 1 flaw, which will describe and get your character, will get some more deepness to your character, yeah. So you choose a central trait. Okay, how trait works? How does this translate into the game system? Well, let's say there's an example here. Let's say your central trait is called military background. What does this mean? Is that anything related to military, having a military background, will be with this trait. In play, okay, you just have to describe something, and if you have a good story of why a military background can be useful to use it, well, you just use it. Okay, it can be shooting a gun, knowing the specs of a jet, or some military tactics. Okay, It can be anything related to that. Okay, you can have, well, this, I said secondary traits. These are called side traits, which, you know, can be, there's an example here. It can be tough. You are tough. Okay, though military background can be a side trait and tough can be a central trait. Okay, you choose. Okay, the central trait is the one that is the most obvious. Every trait that you choose, you must have a sign to it. So this is something that everyone looking at you will have a guess that you can do those stuff. Like military background, maybe you have, well, the example for military background is you wear camo clothes and you have some battle scars or something like that. Okay. When you choose the traits, well, you have one that is superior and two good ones. The superior trait, you just write 4, you know, you will roll 4 dice for it. It doesn't have to be the central trait, it can be any of the trait, the central or the side ones. And the two others would have 3 dice. Well, when you do something that is not, can't be related to any traits that you have, you simply roll 2 dice. Okay. There's an optional rule that is quite cool. It's a narrow trait. Let's say that you're doing something very special. Okay, you are a chess player. Okay, that is quite narrow. You can elect with your game master that, yeah, it's not a very broad trait. It doesn't cover up many things that you can do. You are good at playing chess, so you know the dice distribution will be higher. It's in exchange of not doing much stuff with the trait. And the flaw that when it is used, you have a penalty die. Okay, it works with hit points. You take the trait that is more related to your physical condition and multiply it by 7, and this is the number of hit points that you have. I like the way hit points are handled in this game. It's quite realistic, in fact. You know, when you lose hit points, depending on what made you lose them or how much you have left, you know, it will have an impact in the game. You have some experience pool. Well, it is used to raise up some skills, but you can use it in game to add a bonus die when needed. Okay, and some other stuff, you know, they are encouraging you to have motivation, a secret, some important person, and yeah. Okay, so your character is basically described with words, and you have assigned some numbers to some of the traits that you have, so you know how good you are in those. So like I said in the first few minutes of this video, a basic mechanic, you roll the number of dice related to a trait or not to beat the difficulty number. When you have a bonus, well, you add up 1 dice, you roll all the pool and remove the lowest die, and the contrary if you get a penalty die. If some situations will give you both a bonus and a penalty die, well, they just cancel out each other, so you don't have any. There are many ways to handle dice rolls into this game. Many good optional rules like botches if you roll all ones, having an exploding 6. Well, another good one, which is when you roll and you get one of the dice shows up a 6, well, you have something more, well, something good is added up to the effect. Even though you have failed the roll, okay, you have failed the roll, but something is going to advantage you. So that's quite cool. Alright, yeah, and many ways to handle group efforts if you are many characters doing all this stuff. Many options are offered there. Way more options than most role-playing games, I must say. Combat, you know, you attack, you defend. Well, you use a trait that is related to when you fight. So if you have an obvious trait that is related to fight, you can use it to both attack and defend. Otherwise, you have to both take 2 different traits, okay? So the more fighting type of characters have a good advantage in combat. And damage, it's quite cool the way it's handled. Okay, you make your attack roll against a defense roll, and if you roll more, well, you have succeeded in your attack, and the difference between your result minus, the defense, is a number of points that might be hit points that will be dealt to your enemy, and depending on the weapon you're using, there will be a multiplier applied to that number. Let's say you were fighting with a sword, you have to multiply it by 3. So let's say you have difference of 5 points. You have beaten your target by 5 points. Well, you will deal 15 hit points. And let's say the more tough characters, if they are attacking, the same type of characters of the player characters, and the toughest one, to start with, may have 28 hit points. So 15 hit points by a hit by a sword, that hurts. Combat is very deadly in that. And yeah, like I said, the hit points, the way they are lost, well, have effects on the game. Range attack, the defense is more based upon the range, the distance, and if the target is moving, and that sort of stuff. They encourage you to make a good description of the type of attack and trying to be have a variety into what you are using as an attack. Because they say that the game master can give you a penalty die if you are boring. Let's say I roll, I hit, okay, and they encourage the game master to give a penalty die to those players. Yes, regaining hit points, I like the way it's handled in there. Well, every time you have a wound of some sort, you have to record them separately. Okay, you don't just subtract from the number like that. You have to say, I have hit by a sword, lost. You have to be a little more detailed. After a combat, you can have back, if you rest a little, half of all the damage you have received in that combat. Okay, you can have half of that, and the rest will be healed more slowly. It can take days, weeks, depending. Some combat options. It's very fun to run. Okay, the one shots that I've run were pretty much combat based. It was gladiator fighting a lot, and so the combat was quite a charm. Okay, this is a very easy system to run in that regard. Firearms, lots of firearms rules since Over the Edge, the original game, was a modern game. Well, I think it's normal to have many modern weapons into that book. And finally, the document finished up with fringe powers and magic. So it explains some spells. It's not an extensive list. I guess that in Over the Edge you have more of that, but it was sufficient enough for my one shot. Okay, what do I think of this game? Well, this is a very refreshing game. That is the kind of game that I like. Okay, it's easy to run. It's easy to call up rolls. It's just easy to run, okay, and but it's very deadly. I have discovered that, okay, and but it's an easy to run game, and it works very well with words. Okay, you are under the impression that you can do a lot, but at the same time, and that was the same criticism that the players had and that I had. Well, we were playing fantasy, and we felt that this game didn't fit the fantasy genre a lot. We felt that even though the traits may cover large areas, at the same time we felt that we were kind of trapped into a pattern, okay? And it was hard to not repeat ourselves, you know, when we found out the trick that was good for our character. Maybe it's just a matter of practice, but yeah, that's how we felt. We felt that the characters, we needed more variety into what describes our character. Probably, well, when we think about fantasy, we think about games that we play that, you know, have skill list and all that, and we can work within that. But in Over the Edge, you know, the because it was very broad, yeah, it felt that we repeated ourselves a lot. Probably in a modern setting, it works well a little more. And also, we felt that on the long term, maybe this is not a game to play on the long term. Well, not in fantasy. Okay, we couldn't see how we could get a long campaign with that. Once again, I just played 3 sessions. Maybe it's a matter of practice. But if you want an easy game to run, a game that just got rid of a list, predetermined list, that you just put the words of what your character is doing, you just have a concept, you know what you want, just put it on the paper, and it will go by itself. Every character will be different into that game. I can guarantee that, because the players just decide what they write on their sheet and it works. The game system will support that. So that was my impression and review, kind of review, and well, maybe a little tutorial of the WaRP game system that you can find free on Atlas website. The link is below. Well, I invite you to check that out, because for a game system that was out 25 years ago, it was way ahead of its time. You know, we know lots of games that works that way today, but I think it's one of the first, if I'm correct, that was, you know, just use the words and play with them. So feel free to leave comments, or if you have any questions. My name is François Letarte, and up to next time, I hope you have as much fun in your life as in your games. Goodbye.